At the Jubilee Convention of the National American Women's Suffrage Association in 1919, its president, Carrie Chapman Catt, said, "Raise up a league of women voters. Arise, women voters, in this your first union together. Let the nation hear you pledge all to a crusade that shall not end until the electorate of the Republic is intelligent." You're going to get smarter and smarter tonight. In 1920, the 36th state ratified the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. So the League of Women Voters has been going for 92 years to this day. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League of Women Voters is a grassroots volunteer organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. But we believe that every citizen should be protected in the right to vote. So thank you all very much for coming, and thank you to Central High School for this lovely room in their library. The League of Women Voters is co-sponsoring with the Aurora St. Anthony Neighborhood Development Corporation, the Little Bohemian Neighborhood Association, and the West Side Community Organization. Welcome, everyone. And now our moderator for the evening is Linda McLoone. Are you going to introduce yourself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Linda McLoone, and I'm a resident of Roseville. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of St. Paul, I would like to welcome you all tonight, the candidates, those who have joined us in Central High School tonight, as well as those viewing the candidate forum on cable television. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization organized at the state, local, and national levels to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters, and the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the League of any candidate. All candidates who filed for a seat in Minnesota Senate District 65 and Minnesota House District 65A and 65B were invited to participate, and as you can see, they've all said yes, so thank you, all of you. We encourage our members as individuals, as we encourage each of you, to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. It is our purpose in sponsoring candidate forums such as this to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates face to face, discuss issues that are important to you. There is never enough time to cover all the issues in a limited time in settings such as this. So if your questions are not addressed, we encourage you to contact the candidates directly. So the agenda tonight will be as follows. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement, and I guess I'll start with my far right and we'll work left. And then for the closing statements, we'll just go in the opposite order. And then I'm going to rotate as we answer questions, and we thought we would do give them 2 minutes per response as well. I think 1 minute's a little constraining. You don't have to use all your 2 minutes, but that gives you 2 minutes. Our timer, who's sitting right there, will hold up a sign when you are getting close to the end. And when you are done with your 2 minutes, you will hold up that lovely red stop sign. Of course, you can finish your sentence, but we ask you not to continue. I teach, so I'm pretty good at, no, I'm just kidding. So now I'd like to introduce the candidates. So for Minnesota Senate District 65, we have Rick Karsnia and Sandy Pappas. For the candidates for Minnesota House District 65A, we have Daniel Lipp and Rena Moran. And for Minnesota House District 65B, we have Carlos Conway and Carlos Mariani. I will try to repeat what you're running for as I call on you, and if I forget, just pull your ear or something. So with that, I think we will start our opening statements, and we'll start with Sandy Pappas.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Senator Sandy Pappas, and I live in downtown St. Paul. Previously, I lived on the west side, and before that, I lived in West 7th Street. I've been a resident of St. Paul since the 1970s, I think 76. I'm married to Neil Gosman. We have 3 daughters who all went to this high school, Central High School, and they live abroad, and I have 15 grandchildren that I miss dearly. I would like to thank the League and thank Sigrid and thank Linda for moderating tonight, and thank SPIN for televising this for us, filming it, and cable casting it for us, so that the voters of District 65 can hear from us about the important issues that affect our district. I'm really looking forward to the election and to hopefully having the Democrats win so that I can be back in the majority with the Democratic governor and use my seniority to do good things for St. Paul, for the metro area, for the state of Minnesota. In the areas of education, for example, I'm a strong supporter of early childhood education and of all children being prepared for and able to access higher education, because our kids need some kind of higher education to be ready for the workforce and to be self-fulfilling citizens. I'm also very concerned about job training, about protecting the environment, about developing the Mississippi River as an area that we can use to recreate on and enjoy for our citizens. And we have a lot of big plans for St. Paul for this next year in terms of expansion of the Children's Museum, a remodeling of the TPT studio, and light rail, of course, and the Union Depot. So there's a lot of work ahead, and I look forward to working with my colleagues and my residents of the city to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our second candidate for Senate seat 65 is Rick Karsnia.
Hi there, Rick Karsnia, and wanted to thank all of you concerned citizens. You must be very concerned if you walked up those 4 flights of stairs. I questioned if I was going to make it on flight 3, I think. So thank you to the League of Women's Voters as well. This is very important that candidates at this level, the state level, are able to get together and debate like this, and thanks to the League of Women's Voters. I think I'm a normal guy. I got involved or politically active basically after the birth of my first daughter. And what happens with a lot of new fathers is they find new responsibility and new direction in life when they have their first child. And I started noticing things, being more aware of economics, being more aware of politics, being more aware of government, being more aware of how all of these things influence our lives. And I got involved with the Republican Party. I got involved with a group called Minnesotans for Limited Government. And I really got into this headstrong and really started learning as far as what government is. And looking at what our founding fathers saw, I think that they had it right, and our government followed along with our founding fathers quite well for about 150 years, and after that it kind of slipped away. But one thing, if you would, if you walk away from this, one lesson or fact that you would walk away with is understanding that government is force. It's the only institution that can legally make you do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. And that is very important to have respect, a deep respect for that, in order to understand how that not only affects your lives, but also your neighbors and your family's lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Carlos Mariani, who is running for House seat 65B.
Good evening, buenas noches. My name is Carlos Mariani Rosa. I'm standing for re-election for 65B. It's great to be here at Central High School. Thank you to the League. You've always made wonderful opportunities for citizens to be able to have good discussions with candidates for office. And so thank you for setting this up. It's great to be in Central. My daughter graduated from here several years ago, went on to graduate from Augsburg. is a college educated young lady. My niece graduated from here a year ago and got a full ride to a college in Wisconsin. She's a black Puerto Rican who's majoring in Slavic languages. So she is brilliant, she's beautiful and central, and St. Paul Public Schools has a lot to do with that. My grandson is 7 years old, he's at Adams Immersion School, and it's so much fun having conversations with my little baby boy in Spanish. St. Paul Public Schools, wonderful institution. My philosophy is really pretty simple. I believe in social justice, I believe in fairness, I believe in the power of doing things together. A person who turned 100 years old a year ago was interviewed on national television, and they asked him, what's the most important thing you learned in 100 years? And he says, you know, the most important thing I've learned is that we all have to take care of one another. There are wonderful ways that we can do that as individuals, and there are ways we can do that together through government. So my philosophy of government is that it's a tool of the people, nothing more and nothing less, and it should be used for social justice, for fairness, and for looking out for one another. Look forward to the conversation here with you today.
Thank you. Our next candidate is running for House seat 65A and is Daniel Lip.
Hi, obviously my name is Daniel Lip, running for House District 65A. I'm glad to be here. Tend to enjoy being in front of people, so I got an education degree from North Central. Actually, I moved from Washington State and came to a Bible college here in Minnesota, North Central University. So I try to pick the most liberal state for a good Bible education. You know, the thing is that Rick mentioned about government being forced. This is true. And a lot of these social programs that we talk about, when we talk about, you know, doing stuff along the river or building a park or whatever, what if people don't want to contribute to that? Okay, you'll make laws and the government will take all of their force and they will go to your house and they will collect that money from you. And if you refuse to pay, they will then fine you. And if you refuse to pay that fine, theoretically they will take other measures. What if it's part of your property tax? Will they then come take your house? Will they put you in prison eventually? These are the dangers with so many of these promises of spending, because eventually if you decide not to participate, the force will be inflicted upon you. So we must respect government in such a way that we must prevent it from being a bully to all of us who want to keep what we've made. Some of the things I like about Minnesota, a separate subject here, is that you know, I do like the freedom of homeschooling here. We do homeschool our children here. I know people who've moved from North Dakota with families of the sizes of 7 and 8 to move to Minnesota to enjoy the freedoms of homeschooling here. I would be afraid, and I would like to, in a sense, prevent any sort of law that would disenable people from training their own children at home. My child reads a full grade level above his age, and I like that freedom to maintain. I know that at times that it seems that teachers' unions work against that, where they want to make sure that all the students come to their school so they can assure more money. I would like the freedom. Education by all means whatsoever. God bless St. Paul.
Thank you. Also running for House seat 65A, Rena Moran.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rena Moran. I'm running for re-election in District 65A. I want to thank the League for creating this opportunity for us to all come before you to engage you and for you to better get to know who we are, so that you can make an informed decision come November the 6th on the candidate who best represent you and your values and what you stand for as an individual, for you, yourself, your family, and your community. So thank you, Lee, for this opportunity. I am a mother. I'm a mother of 7. I have 4 sons and 3 daughters. They range from 18 to 28. I'm also a grandmother of 2. I have a 10-year-old grandson and a 2-year-old soon-to-be granddaughter who is fascinating, who I love dearly. So if anyone would to ask me, who am I and what do I love to do most, and that is to parent and to be a grandparent. Got connected through to the political process because of my family. I moved here 12 years ago from Illinois and really decided that I was here by myself with my kids, and that it was important to me to connect to a community, because I came up in an age where it was about communities taking care of each other. You know, we should never ever believe that, we are just responsible for ourselves. And so for me, it was really important to do that, connect to my neighbors, get to know community organizations. And the more that I did that, I really found out that, not only is it important that I know my neighbors in the community, but I connect what I do to a political process, because that political process was impacting my life and my children's lives in the school they attended. And so the community, your community lives and that political process is connected, they go hand in hand. And each day that we wake up to make decisions, we must also be aware that it's important that the political process play a role in our lives and that we are connected to that. So in 2010, I ran for office. Became the first African American to represent St. Paul in the House of Representatives. And today I am running for re-election to continue my work and my passion around education. My degree is in early childhood education, a field that I taught in for 15 plus years while raising my kids. Thank you.
So finally, our last candidate who's running for House seat 65B is Carlos Conway.
Hi, thanks for having me. As the moderator said, my name is Carlos Conway. Thank you, League of Voters, for having us again. I've lived in Minnesota for about 10 years now. St. Paul for about 5. I currently live in the West 7th area between Jefferson and Randolph, if you're familiar with the area. I've been married for about 5 years to my wife Priscilla. She's just right over there. We have a 1-year-old daughter, and I am very happy to announce we have another one on the way. She's about 6 weeks pregnant. She doesn't want me to tell anybody right now, but yeah, I want the world to know. I'm so excited that we're having another kid. I currently work for UPS as a delivery driver. I've been doing that for about 7 years. So I'm a member of Teamsters Local 638, for those of you who are familiar with unions and whatnot. I got involved in the political process in January. Like everyone up here, I'm concerned for my own family. My daughter, want her to grow up to have just basic freedoms, to just choose the life that she wants to live. Really, this is all about our children, our future. So, and as you can see up here too, we all come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities. St. Paul is very diverse, and I think what makes it really unique. We all have different values and different cultures, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I just tend to think that our differences is the reason why no bureaucrat or politician can ever really know what we need individually. That no bureaucrat or politician can ever really know what's best for everybody. Only you know what's best for you and your family. And right now, individual liberty is very important to me. Economic freedom is very important to me, as I'm sure it is for you. Right now, big government is threatening individual liberty with the marriage amendment. People who promote progressive taxation that's a threat to economic freedom. Thank you.
So, we have lots of questions, and we'll have lots of time to come back to all of these issues, I have no doubt. So for our next question, or first question, I guess, we'll start with Rick Karshnia. And we'll just jump right in. What do you believe is a fair taxing system for Minnesota?
Yes, first of all, I think we have to be very respectful as far as what taxation is. And taxation is money from the people to government, and then the government hands it out or redistributes it, however you want to look at it, but pays for programs. And I believe that our income tax is actually very regressive, because what you're doing is you're actually taxing the person. You're taxing what that person wants to be. If that person, like myself, maybe I want to work 80 hours a week and earn double what I'm making now, that income tax, that progressive income tax actually would hurt my family. Or if somebody, let's say, decides to be a doctor or something along those lines, they have a lot of investment into that. And then on the back end, that income tax can hurt them by taxing them more because they have a higher paying job. But their labor is an extension of them as a person, and that's very important to respect. And I believe that for Minnesota, a flat tax with no exemptions is the best route to go. A reduced flat tax, so everybody knows that what the tax is. It's very transparent. The government knows what they're going to get. They know how much they can spend. If they want to spend more, they have to go to the people and ask for more. And also, we shouldn't have exemptions. Exemptions are basically used to offer political payment, really, to lobbyists and special interest groups for the politician. So a flat tax, very transparent, that's the freest way to, freest and most transparent way for Minnesotans to get money from themselves, from their families, and give it to the government.
Thank you. Carlos Mariani.
Well, first, the question needs to be contextualized in terms of why we have taxes. And if you remember what I said, that my philosophy, part of my philosophy is government is a tool of the people. Government doesn't exist apart from the people, nor should it. It is our tool. And so when we tax through government, what we are doing is we are sharing among the people the commonwealth, the riches that we produce together in community in order to meet those needs that we cannot meet by ourselves. My niece, who graduated from here, was not going to learn Slavic languages from a Puerto Rican family. She learned it from a public school system, well-equipped, well-trained to be able to provide her access to the world. It's a public good that the public decides in a very transparent way to produce. And so taxes are collected to produce those things that we cannot simply do by ourselves. Now, the best tax system is several things. It should be progressive. By that I mean that it should be based on the wealth that we generate, and so those who are blessed for lots of reasons to be able to generate a lot more wealth should have a bigger responsibility in terms of putting into that common good. The second thing is there should be a mix of taxes. It shouldn't just be one tax. Anyone who studies economics knows that certain taxes are going to rise or fall depending on what's happening in the economy. The third thing is that it should be expansive. And by that I mean that expansive is the wrong word. It should be broad. We should be broadly looking at the way in which we prosper and then look at ways in which we capture part of that wealth back for the common good, and not just focus on one single tax, because ultimately there's going to be a group of people who are not going to fit into the ability to meet that particular tax obligation.
Thank you. Daniel Lipp.
Well, the interesting thing is, before 1913, what was the income tax rate? 0. Did we have roads? Yeah, we had roads. We have schools? Yeah, we had schools. We have one of the most incredible militaries in the world at the time. Yeah, we fought several wars before that. I don't think that the amount of taxes that are being collected are necessary. Do they really need to pay for all of these things? See, the big teaching, sociologically speaking, I suppose, is that we need to tax and spend, because if we don't tax your money, you'll save it, and so then it won't go anywhere. So if the government takes it, we'll spend it, we'll put it to good use, we'll provide jobs. So the misunderstanding there is that they don't realize that if you kept your own money, you'd spend your own money. If I had my taxes, my property tax, for example, $3,800 a year or whatever it is, I might pay someone to paint my house. I might pay more people to fix my car. I might buy a better car. I would spend the money on my family, and that would go to people who are working, who are looking for jobs. Okay, what happens is these taxes are taken from us, and then the government goes and provides these jobs. But they don't just pay for the job, they also pay for the bureaucracy to take your money and to distribute it and to hand it out to people, and then those people finally are the ones who are doing the jobs. It's usually less efficient. Is my mic cut off? Oh, okay. No, I know you hear me right here. So in any case, I think that the taxes should be reduced. I agree with Rick as far as the fair tax is concerned. Part of the problem these days is we don't know, especially with the healthcare mandates coming down, we don't know how expensive the things are going to be, and we're all afraid to hire other people because we might just very well be stuck paying bills that we can't afford for this massive bureaucracy that won't benefit us at all. Thank you.
Rita Moran.
Thank you. Much of what Representative Carlos Mariani spoke about, I agree with, that we, definitely need a more progressive taxation where everyone is paying their fair share. I truly believe that those who make less should not be paying more in taxing than those who make much more. And the purpose for taxes is that it provides services. And and I think we have a history of knowing that, not everyone starts off life in the same place. And for that reason, services are needed. That what makes us as the United States a humane country who looks not only after ourselves, but many other countries to ensure that people are treated and supported in a humane fashion. So they serve their purpose. I believe that government has a place in our lives to ensure that that happens. And and again, I just really do support a more progressive taxation.
Thank you. I forgot to do rebuttals, but I'll remember this time, I promise. Excuse me. So Carlos Conway.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to simplify the tax code. I hear a lot that it's very complex, and big businesses, hire people to do these things. They have the money to do so. Small businesses don't. They spend a lot of time trying to figure out something that is really complex. I'm not an expert at taxes, but I'm going to have to take the small business owner's word for it. It needs to be simplified. It needs to be easier to understand. It needs to be reduced. A progressive tax it threatens economic freedom for everybody, whether you make a lot of money or you don't make a lot of money. And that's really what we need to look at. We want you to have more of your own money to invest the way you think it should be invested. And that free markets are probably the best way to do certain projects like education or healthcare, creating jobs even. They're more efficient at it. This is what they do. If we just need to simplify taxes to what right now, according to the Tax Foundation, according to taxfoundation.org, Minnesota has one of the worst tax climates for businesses. Even though Minnesota's got a pretty good unemployment rate of, I think it's 5.8 right now, it could be better if we reduce taxes, and not just for a certain amount of people, for everybody. And that's my take on it.
Thank you very much. And finally, Sandy Pappas.
Thank you very much. I just have a couple points I wanted to add. Oliver Wendell Holmes was quoted as saying that taxes is the price we pay for civilization. If we want to have a community that functions, we need to have rules, and we need to have a way to enforce rules, and we need to have public services. Most taxes that we pay in Minnesota are regressive, sales and property taxes. It's our small income tax that helps make our overall tax system less regressive. And finally, most Minnesota taxes go to pay for the schools, and I'm a strong believer in the public schools. I think that's where students from all different countries historically have learned how to become Americans, and we need to have that melting pot available in the public schools and not go off in our own little private schools, which would happen under a voucher system. Our property taxes also, a lot of those go for the schools as well, or police and fire. It's not realistic to think that we're all going to go out and hire our own police forces, our own fire forces to protect our properties. That's what we need the community to do. And finally, I'm really tired of hearing this argument about the business climate. What businesses really want is a well-educated workforce, and we have that in Minnesota. They want research. They want a research engine like the University of Minnesota that's constantly inventing new things with business applications. And they want a good transportation system, both roads and transit. And we have all those things in Minnesota. What we don't have is a warm climate. But we're getting there. It was 70 degrees today.
So I apologize for not doing rebuttals. This is the only league that does that, and so it just goes out of my brain. So we'll give it a 30-second chance for rebuttals. You can or cannot respond, and I'll just go down in the same order that we started with, just to be fair. And so we'll start with Rick Karshnia, if he has a 30-second rebuttal.
I guess two common misconceptions that a lot of people have is that somebody like myself doesn't want certain services like education or health care for people. That's a big misconception. The second misconception is that government is the best solution for whatever we're looking for, whether it's education, building roads, schools, hospitals. Government might not be the best solution. I believe that freedom is, and the free market is the best solution.
Thank you. Carlos Mariani.
Well, I certainly don't want to go back to living in 1917. And I certainly do not believe that the private marketplace has any interest in building a road between here and Duluth. They cannot get the return on investment for doing that. The private marketplace will not build nursing homes because they're not going to get the return on investment on old people who are dying. There are some things we simply do because they are decent to do, they are smart to do, and they are smart to do together. Government certainly cannot and should not do everything, but government is our tool for us to serve the people with. In order to do that, we need a good, strong, and fair tax system.
Thank you. Daniel Lip.
Sure, I just, when people say that we have to take care of people and therefore we have to raise taxes so that the government can give to these people, what that implies is that you won't do it on your own, okay? What that says is that you're not going to give to these people. The government is the only ones who are compassionate. So I'm going to take the money from you, and now we're going to help these people. So what this isn't really charity. Charity is when you go and help somebody. When you force other people to go help people by taking their money and giving it to them, that's not charity at all. That's abuse.
Thank you. Rena Moran.
So I'm going to disagree with my opponent here around when government gives to people, they don't do anything, they just sit around and collect. And I'm a product of that. I came to Minnesota homeless, with 6 kids. And my first priority was to look for a job. But I used the government for assistance for my basic needs. But as soon as I could find a job, that took 2 to 3 months for me to find a job. And I have, since that moment, been taking care of myself and my family. And that's what most people want. Most people want to take care of themselves and provide for themselves.
Thank you. Carlos.
Yeah, I think there is a misconception with this whole tax conversation. I think we all have a responsibility to care for one another. I would certainly do it more if I had more money. There's no question about that. That's what we would all do. There's no question about it. The debate is whether government does it better or if free markets or the private organization does it better. And before government was really big, there were private sectors that created schools and hospitals and so on and so forth.
Thank you. And finally, Sandy Pappas.
Thank you. Just a final comment, a little history lesson. The late 1990s in Minnesota, we cut our taxes $2 billion. And did anyone notice? Some were the old Jesse checks, they were called, that were mailed out to people, and some were rate reductions. But what it did mean for the community is that we were perpetually short of dollars. We were cutting necessary programs in our schools, right, John? And now we've had to borrow $1.7 billion from the schools in delayed payments. That's not the right way to run a government.
Thank you. So there's just so many questions here. They're so rich and interesting. So I think, since I have the most on this one, I will ask this one, and I'm just going to pick kind of one of the ways to ask it. So how much, and for this one we will start with Carlos Mariani, who is running for House Seat 65B. How much additional public money is predicted to cost for if both of the amendments pass that are on the ballot? And what your feeling is about whether these are worth it or not?
Well, there are 2 different ballot questions, of course. I don't know the exact numbers in terms of additional costs, but let's take them one at a time. So you've got the voter restriction amendment, the so-called voter ID question. The question before the public, however, doesn't spell out how government is going to carry this out. And so the cost In all fairness, the cost will be determined by subsequent statutory action that the legislature and the governor will need to take in order to implement that law. Estimates range pretty wildly, but or broadly rather, but they do not come in cheap. We are talking about local government's responsibility to deliver an electoral system, your Ramsey County here. That does not come in, that does not happen cheap for them to be able to train and verify identifications of people coming in a different way than we're currently doing. It will be more money, it will be, and Ramsey County gets its money to do this, by the way, from your property taxes. So the question on the marriage amendment is a little bit trickier, I think, but I think it's pretty safe to say, because we have several constitutional challenges across the nation to these kind of efforts, that doesn't come cheap. You're talking about court costs, you're talking about attorney costs, you're talking about appeals, you're talking about something that should be very carefully, absolutely, deliberated, because we are talking about the rights of individuals and fellow citizens. So therefore, we want to make sure that the courts carefully consider the constitutional nuances that are not going to be answered by a simple amendment. So I can expect the state to expend quite a few dollars in defending itself from those who feel aggrieved by that particular constitutional amendment.
Thank you. Next, Daniel Lipp for House Seat 65A.
First Amendment of the Constitution, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. I consider marriage a basically religious argument. I don't agree with the marriage amendment. I don't know the costs involved whatsoever, but it's based on the fact that two adults can make an agreement onto how they're going to live their lives. My wife and I, we debated whether or not even to report to the government. Part of the problem with this whole thing is that it creates a type of envy. For example, my wife and I, we receive tax benefits that a couple living together who haven't notified the state of their marriage, we receive benefits that they don't, or theoretically a homosexual couple that we have tax benefits that they don't. And so this creates a type of envy. I would be willing, as all Americans have created equal, I'd be willing to give up any benefits that we have under our government, in a sense, recognized relationship so that we could all be equal. I think if we're all equal, and we all look at each other equally as Americans, we have nothing to argue about. So I think that a lot of times these type of debates are what is all that's left for us, right? While NDAA was passed January 1st, your civil liberties are crushed. You can be executed by the president. You can be imprisoned without any sort of right to an attorney or charges. All these things are in place. These things can happen now in Minnesota. Okay, but we get to argue about these little things. There's bigger things at foot. I can fight for your freedoms. You can fight for mine. For the next 20 years, removing the restrictions of our freedoms. And we would never have a reason to argue.
Thank you. Rena Moran, again, House Seat 65A.
Thank you. Well, I agree that, we all should have the right to liberty and freedom and that choice. That is what our Constitution stands for, and I truly believe that government has no place in the separation of church and state. It's definitely been violated there, so I really believe that government should not be in that business. So what I've heard, the quotes is that the constitutional restriction, the voter restriction constitutional amendment can cost somewhere between $50 and $100 million. I don't have a number for the marriage amendment, but again, there may be court cases that will be brought up on that behalf.
Thank you. Carlos Conway, who's running for House Seat 65B.
Yeah, I haven't heard any numbers on the marriage amendment and how much that would cost to be implemented, but I agree with my colleagues here that I don't believe the role of government is to define marriage. I believe this is a personal issue. And as adults, I think we're capable of defining it for ourselves. And yeah, if there weren't these tax benefits in place, or if government wasn't involved, yeah, we wouldn't have this argument, and everyone would live free and equal. So, but yeah, as far as the ID, I've heard a lot of different numbers as well, from 10 million to 100 million. So I guess we can only really look back at other states that have implemented it and see how much they've spent to gauge how much it could or could not cost.
Thank you. Sandy Pappas, who's running for Senate seat 65.
Yes, there's going to be 3 items on the ballot. One is the school referendum for a new levy for the schools, and that will cost the average household owner, the average house, about $50, I believe, a year. And that will provide really important preschool services for our students, kindergarten services, technology, and I think it's a reasonable amount of money for us to pay for having good, strong public schools in St. Paul. The voter restriction amendment, according to Joe Mansky at Ramsey County Elections, will cost Ramsey County taxpayers $3 million to implement that. And that will be on top of what will cost the state to issue state-issued IDs to those who don't have driver's licenses, because the amendment says those have to be issued for free. So it could be quite costly, and it's a solution looking for a problem. We have relatively very few cases of fraud, and this voter ID provision would not even have caught those cases. Finally, a little humor here. I think with the marriage amendment will be a lost opportunity for private businesses, because they won't have the income from weddings and receptions if we allowed gay couples to marry.
Thank you. Rick Karshnia.
I actually love questions like this. Remember my fact that I gave out to you, that government is force? Right now, this is what we're faced with the vote no with the marriage amendment, or vote yes with the marriage amendment. Now, you as a citizen are going to have the choice on the ballot to force your neighbor into a definition that you see fit, or to let them live freely. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say government is force. Right now, we don't know how much this is going to cost, either any of these amendments. And I think it's kind of wild speculation to throw out money, right? To throw out dollar figures right now. I don't think we need to do that. What we need to understand is that it's going to be up to each and every one of us to understand what the amendments are about, understand that it is going to affect people you might not agree with. And that's the important thing to do, is to sometimes stand up for people that you don't agree with, because we live in a free country. And these are the things that we have to concentrate on. But in the end, it's not up to any of us up here, except for we're all equal with our votes. It's up to everybody in this room. Thank you.
So I'd like to ask if there are anyone interested in rebuttals, or?
Well, I would only add that whatever the number is in terms of the voter restriction, it's going to be costly. You're talking about redoing our election process. That doesn't just happen. It's going to cost, and it's happening for no really good purpose. And in terms of the argument of fearing government forcing, I think we should always be vigilant of government force. However, this wasn't government. This was the GOP Minnesota Republican Party that forced this issue and put it on the ballot.
Thank you. Daniel Lipp, a rebuttal?
No.
Irina Moran?
I would just say this is definitely, these 2 amendments stands right in opposition of what I hear my Republican colleagues when they talk about freedom and being taxed and something being forced on it. I mean, this is exactly what we see is happening with these 2 constitutional amendments, and really misuse of money and tax money. Now, we are at a place where we have a deficit. We should be creating jobs. We should be ensuring that we have safe communities, and here we are going to pay $50 to $100 million on something that isn't a problem. So that's a real issue.
Thank you. Daniel Lipp apparently changed his mind, so we'll let him go back. We'll go back. Be nice.
Well, just a brief point. I mean, as much as we are GOP endorsed, a lot of the GOPers in our area in St. Paul are liberty-minded individuals. We don't share 100% of all GOP decisions here, so a lot of us are mostly concerned about your liberties and your freedom, and making sure that we can enable you to keep as many as you can and restore as many that have been taken from you. So I can't always paint all GOPers with a wide brush.
Conway, do you have a rebuttal?
That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Sandy Pappas, do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, we have a voter system that's been the envy of other states. I believe we have the second highest voter turnout in the country. The highest is North Dakota, and they don't require registration at all. So why would we want to dismantle a system that empowers people, that you have same-day voter registration? We have safeguards in place to catch any kind of fraud that might occur, and it's a felony. We have a hard enough time getting people to vote, let alone being worried that people are going to vote twice. We just want them to vote once.
Thank you. And Rick Karshnia?
I do believe that it is important to protect your vote, just like it is important to protect your property or your family or something along those lines. That's why we have laws. That's why we have a constitution that enables government to protect those things. And I do believe that in this circumstance we have to take a look at voter ID and the importance of it.
Thank you. So the next question will start with Daniel Lipp. The building of the light rail has really hurt businesses along University Avenue. Do you have some strategies to help rebuild this corridor?
Dig it up, put it underground. Too late for that. It's too late for an elevated train. This is a problem, and we knew that it was going to be a problem because you look along Hiawatha. Do you see any booming business development? We didn't know. We didn't know this was going to be problematic for the stores along University. I mean, they say that the amount of traffic that's supposedly going to be benefited by the train, by the light rail, that same amount, okay, the need to transport humans from one point to the other could have been done with just a couple extra buses. We really need to spend this kind of money. My answer is no. I mean, you know, if Hiawatha, if there was businesses up and down Hiawatha, just people are getting dropped off, and it was this booming industry that was provided by this transit system, then we'd have some justification for what we've done. I mean, it's going to go forward. It's going to be built. I guess what we have to do is really look at if we need to expand it or build another one along West 7th or, you know, whatever the plans are. These benefiting people, I mean, they're really, really expensive. And not to mention, they don't just take state money. They take money from other Americans. They took federal money to build us our unproductive light rail. I mean, if it was such a good idea, wouldn't a private business have moved in to profit from it? Wouldn't they have volunteered to do it? Why? But it doesn't make any money. It loses money. Every time someone gets on that train, the thing loses money, and you're going to be paying that for the rest of your life. Enjoy. It's not going to be covered by any sort of gambling revenues or anything else. Well, of course, that's the stadium. That's another question. Things like this are problematic in general.
Thank you. Rena Moran.
You are exactly right. Many of the businesses are being impacted by the light rail. It has hit many of the small pops and moms businesses on the corridor very, very hard. And, you know, we had a community, and along with myself, who organized around the impact that the light rail will have on communities. It really lost business, rising property taxes, and people just really been displaced. I introduced some legislation in 2011 to kind of like support small business and homeowners in the light rail, but it did not get a hearing in any committee. So my hope is that I can reintroduce that once we go back and take the majority back in come November 6th. That's the hope. And whether or not we take back the majority, I will still introduce this bill again, because I think we really need to support businesses in the corridor along with families.
Thank you. Carlos Conway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what we can do to help the businesses that have suffered from the construction. I mean, the damage is done. So how do we go back on that? I don't know. Daniel Lipp is right. We could have just added a few more buses instead of spending so much money on something we really don't need. I don't see how adding more buses is less efficient than building a light rail. I have a hard time seeing that. So yeah, we really have to look at the cost benefit of this in relation to the Hiawatha light rail, to the University light rail. If this is harmful to businesses, then we shouldn't do it again. in any other area, if it's not being what we hoped it would be, then we should put the kibosh on it and just do the smart thing. Just add a few more buses.
Everyone gets a chance first. So next up is Sandy Pappas.
Light rail has been very difficult in the implementation, and I know it's been hard on a lot of the businesses and disruptive to families who live in that area. And I think there wasn't very good enough planning to provide kind of the support and the marketing and the assistance to the businesses along the corridor. But I do think that once it's completed, and it's very exciting to watch it be almost completed, it's going to be a tremendous boon to the area. It's not an accurate comparison to Hiawatha because Hiawatha is mostly a residential area, but this is going down a major commercial corridor. And we did fight for an extra stop in the neighborhood, and the Met Council did agree to that, and I think that's going to be very useful, and it's going to help us develop Union Depot in downtown St. Paul as a major transit and transportation hub. And it really is not fair to expect that public transportation is going to break even because roads don't break even. Roads cost a tremendous amount of money. We think they're free, but they actually are far more costly to build major freeways than it is to build a light rail system. And a light rail system also has a higher capacity. And additional buses would just clog up the streets. It would not be very efficient. A light rail will be able to transport people fast and efficiently.
Thank you. Rick Karshnia?
Yes, I believe that the light rail is a fine example of unintended consequences of a government action. It was proposed that this would hurt businesses, it would hurt people living in that area before it ever went in. And traffic has been horrible. It pretty much, I have to work, or I make sales calls in that area, and I tried my best to avoid it altogether. I try my best to avoid university altogether just because I don't want to get caught in the traffic of the construction. We spent a lot of money on the construction itself. We have very, very nice new copper roofs on the light rail. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's beautiful. It's basically what we're doing is we're keeping up with the Joneses. We're keeping up with other states or other cities, and the taxpayers are funding it. And it hurts people. This is an unintended consequence of government. Also, what we have to look at is, I'm going to put it this way right out there, is the crack or the heroin that the federal government is giving states and cities basically to do projects like this. The federal government had its hand in giving us about a third or close to 50%. Okay, so the U.S. government offers 50% of the cost, which makes other people spend even more wildly. It takes away all understanding of what's being spent and what is going to happen with those unintended consequences. And the idea is to reject this federal money because they're trying to do this with healthcare and education as well. And you know what? I'm just going to stand up for the citizens of Minnesota, and I say we do what we want with education, with healthcare, and let's do what we want with public transportation as well.
Thank you. And finally, Carlos Mariani.
Well, two things. One, I do believe that the LRT construction management was implemented poorly. And as a result, we've got lots of folks that are hurting. I think it's fair to say. I also believe, frankly, I've been involved in these discussions for a long time. I frankly thought it should have gone down I-94. I thought the idea was to move people in a regional manner, and that made a heck of a lot more sense to me. Now, let me say this. More buses will solve the problem for a short period of time. At some point, you're going to have to add more buses, and then more buses, and then more buses. I've been in those cities around the world that don't have a mature, mixed-use approach to moving people around. And what happens is those cities stop functioning. Tampa Bay, a couple of years ago, run by a Republican mayor, Republican administration, begged the Florida governor, who was Republican at that time, to take federal support to build the LRT. Why? Because the Chamber of Commerce, every business in Tampa said, we cannot grow our businesses because we can't get anybody into where our businesses are at. We cannot move people around. That's how congested it is. We're not there yet. I get that. But why would we want to get there before we then build a mixed-use, smart, and better implemented plan? It'll be more costly. We'll lose business. We will not have business growth, and business investors will go somewhere else to grow their businesses. Guess what? They're going to go to those communities that have a mature transportation system that does include LRT.
Thank you. So we'll see if people would like to do a rebuttal, and we'll start with Daniel Lipp.
I know that when companies move to other states and they build factories, a lot of times they'll build their own transportation to their factories. They build a road, transportation system. Even at the airport, they'll pick us up and move us out to where we need to get onto the job site. But the light rail in general, excuse me, closer, okay. Light rail in general is one of those ideas of it's a big government idea. If they dump a bunch of money into this project, yes, something will be built and all these jobs will be created. Already?
Thank you. 30 seconds. Rena Moran. Rena Moran.
Although the development and the construction of the light rail has caused big problems with businesses and community members, it is a good thing. Redevelopment of a community brings access to jobs and opportunity in a safe and thriving community and environment. And I think definitely the community that I live in, Summit U and Frogtown, deserve to have a community that is thriving with development.
Thank you. Carlos Conway.
I was actually sharing with Carlos Mariani that I spent some time in Turkey, not saying that we have to adopt their transportation system, but it ran pretty effectively. They ran buses like every 30 seconds, and everyone was on them. It ran really great. So it didn't cause the problems. The city didn't shut down because of congestion. It ran very smoothly.
Thank you. Sandy Pappas.
Pass.
Thank you. Rick Karshnia.
I kind of got off the question. The question was how to revitalize businesses along University after the light rail was put in. And I do apologize for that, but there's really no way to do it, and that's the problem that we're in. A government-made solution is actually the problem, and now we have to go back to government again to fix or go back over what it originally created, and that happens time and time again. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carlos Mariani.
Well, I think my colleague here also reminded me that I got off track too, and that's fair. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to take a lot longer than 30 seconds to get into that. But I think the point here is that there's a relationship between the private marketplace and the people's government. When there is a relationship and it's strong and it's powerful, we are a powerful people. When we just let businesses do and hang and suffer by themselves, we are weak people. When we make our government weak, we are weak people. It's really about the balance of the relationship between the two sectors.
Thank you. So this next question will start with Rena Moran. Again, she's running for House Seat 65A. So last year, the lack of willingness to compromise closed the state in terms of trying to pass a budget. Could you tell us how you could work more bipartisanly, or how the legislature could work more bipartisanly to pass a balanced Minnesota budget?
As a new representative coming into the political process in 2010 at the Capitol, I was really amazed at how partisan and political and arrogant the majority can be in just considering that, it was more or less our way or the highway. And I am one who believes in great partnerships and working across the lines to come to a common goal around common values about what we all need, which is one of the reasons why I was able to get an education transportation bill passed off the House floor through a bipartisan partnership. But that didn't always happen. They saw the majority, and I'm not too joyed about the whole process, because when you are the majority, you have the power on whatever bill, legislation passes or come to each committee that comes to the floor that goes before the governor. And they was just, even there were some pretty hard bills that came through my committees. And even when I talked personally with many of my Republican colleagues about the impact, you know, and they would agree that it was harmful, but we would get in committee and they would vote down party lines, regardless of the impact. You know, they would get on the House floor and they would pass it off the House floor. So it takes a willingness of people to be open to a worldview that goes beyond just their own worldview.
Thank you. Carlos Conway, again, who's running for House Seat 65B.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be smart about balancing the budget. We can't just think short term and raise taxes all the time. We have to think long term. Creating businesses, which the private sector does, creating jobs, is a good way to increase revenue and balance the budget. That's a long-term solution. I lost my train of thought. But, you know, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. So Sandy Pappas, running for Senate Seat 65.
Thank you, Linda. I think the key word here is compromise. And as Rena mentioned, that we had a majority control who didn't understand that politics is about compromise. And it does mean that I don't always get my way and you don't always get your way, but somehow we have to still make government run, and that's working in a bipartisan way with a balanced approach. I think if we face a deficit this year, we will obviously look for any inefficiencies. I don't want to see my tax dollars wasted any more than any of us do. But also I think we're going to have to adjust the tax rates. We either adjust them to where they were back in the late 1990s before we made these billion-dollar cuts and have these persistent deficits, or we do things like broaden the sales tax. Other states have much broader sales tax than we do, and I think that's an option that we need to look at to have a balanced approach.
Thank you. Rick Karshnia, who is also running for Senate Seat 65.
Yes, the lack of compromise caused the government shutdown, and I was actually kind of cheering for it, quite honestly, because it shows us, I think it showed us how little it impacted our lives for that government to shut down for a few days. And I'm sorry if your life was impacted any more than that, but there are ways around that too, with charity and calling on family and friends. But we throw that word out in politics all the time: compromise, compromise. And the people who don't compromise, the people who stand their ground for principle or for a philosophy, I don't care about elephants any more than I care about donkeys. It doesn't bother me, whatever. But when we throw words around like compromise to try and bully people into doing things, I think it's wrong. I think you should be able to stand your ground. I think that compromise is misused, that word, because let's face it, we could all get together and compromise to rob a bank. We could all compromise and go blow up a building. Hopefully I'm not going to get arrested for saying that, but compromise can be used for bad things as well as good things. So we have to be careful of that. And how I would compromise when I'm elected is I would look for people on both sides of the aisle that are willing to stand up for individual liberties, what people want to do for their families and in their community should be supported by government, by being protected by government. And we should be able to choose our own healthcare policy, our own education, and we should be able to have a government where it's okay not to compromise, where politicians can stand their ground once in a while. I actually cheer for that.
Thank you. Carlos Mariani, who's running for House Seat 65B.
Well, there's a lot in this question. There's a question of bipartisanship, and there's a question of, balancing a budget. So I hope another question comes out, because I think we need to dig into both of those. But let me say this, that my oath to you, when you entrust me to be your representative, is to serve the people. That's the bottom line. And I can be as egotistical and as tough and as stubborn as anyone else. And frankly, I think there's nothing wrong with being partisan. I think you have ideas, you fight for them, you put them out in the public debate, you engage like we're doing here, you go back and forth, you convince people, and then you add up the votes, and then you move forward. That's how our system is designed. But make no mistake about it, it's designed in the end to serve the people, not to serve the game. And that's not what we had 2 years ago when we had the government shutdown. We had an engineered game going way back to the beginning of session, to shut the government down. That's what we had. My history, my personal history, is that I was taught from the very beginning, Carlos, learn to go across the aisle, because that's what it's going to take to get certain things done. I did that, and for many years, I was very successful with that. It's getting harder and harder to do that. My history is also that I'm willing to be independent enough that my own party and my own stakeholders in my party have beaten the heck out of me in recent years because I am willing to serve you first and foremost. That is the character that you have to be a representative, a senator of the people. And I guess I'll stop there. I hope we get into some more questions about the budget itself.
Thank you. And finally, Daniel Lipp, who is running for House Seat 65A.
Sure. I was gonna, man, Rick took most of the words out of my mouth. Appreciate that, Rick. Compromise, really, is that what's good? Is that what's always best for you, just compromise? What if the person you're compromising is a very bad person, right? So you're standing on a moral high ground and you compromise with something that is bad. Is that good for anybody? No. The problem with bipartisanship in America is when both parties get together, the American people usually get screwed. Something gets spent that doesn't need to get spent. Something gets taxed that doesn't need to get taxed. I think it's a big problem. People tend to compromise too rapidly. They don't stick to their own principles. You know, George Bush started out as a non-government interventionist, small government individual, and he ended up starting a lot of wars and spending a lot of money. Obama started out as a civil liberties guy, and now what? Then he extended the Patriot Act, expanded Guantanamo, signed NDAA, you know, and now everyone who was Republican just stayed on board with George Bush, a lot of them, and everyone who was a Democrat just stayed on board with Obama, and then everyone changed their positions based on the leadership. Why can't any of us stand on principle? Why can't we all fight for each other's civil liberties? Why can't we get out of, federal issues here, but get out of these wars? And how about, even locally, NDAA affects the freedoms of the people here, okay? We should be able to fight for each other's freedoms here. Most people don't even know about this kind of stuff. So, when it comes to the budget, I mean, there's a lot of times when there's just things that can't be compromised about. I think that you have to stick to your principle. Ron Paul never voted against the Constitution in all his terms of office, and I respect a man like that, and I think those types of people should be sought after. Not everyone who compromises, because what are they? They're wishy-washy. You think you're going to get something done by compromising your principles, and that's not always the case. Too much compromise is taking place in this country, and you have a lower moral individual in office these days because of that.
Thank you. So rebuttal, Rena Moran.
I've learned that government plays a big part in our children's lives, in the elders' life, and those who are disabled. That is a big part of where so much of the funds go to. And when government shut down, it impacts people, especially over these last 4 years when family members have lost jobs and nonprofits are folding up because the funds are not there. I mean, people in our economy has been in crisis. And when the government shuts down, that impacts real people's lives, in terms of mortgage, trying to stay in their homes, trying to purchase food. It has real impacts. And so,
Thank you. Sorry, I was busy thinking. Carlos Conway, rebuttal.
Yeah, I would just add, yeah, partisanship is not always a bad thing. It just shows someone has principle and they're not willing to compromise, and I admire a person like that, even if I disagree with them.
Thank you. Sandy Pappas, rebuttal.
I guess I started this all by using that word compromise, but it's just the reality, I think, of a practical politician is that we all have different opinions, and yet we want to get something done for the people, as Carlos mentioned, for the community. And sometimes you can't get the whole loaf. You can only get half the loaf, but half the loaf is better than nothing. I could stand on my high horse and say, I'm not going to compromise because of my principles, but then I would never be able to do anything good for the community that we need and that we want. And we're a struggling community. We need the state to be helping us and being a partner with us. So we have to compromise sometimes.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Rick Karshnia.
I would be the guy to compromise probably the least, maybe. And I would find to work with people to help them see that it's important to stand up for the freedoms of individuals in this room, your neighbors, your family, the rest of Minnesota, and to learn those lessons of government. Government is force, and there's always unintended consequences with government.
Thank you, Carlos Mariani. Rebuttal?
I love this compromise conversation. You know, the job is to serve the people. We don't teach our kids to not get along with others. You should do that. If you cannot get along with others, if you cannot work out an agreement, you simply cannot govern, and frankly, you should not be elected. There is no contradiction between having principles and fighting like hell for them, and then finding that room where you can meet the other person. It can be done. It often is done. It's mostly done for good. I've certainly done it, and I'll continue to do it.
Thank you. And Daniel Lev, rebuttal?
Well, I guess back to compromise again. If there was someone, you're talking about children, if someone who is bad wants my child to compromise, I would hope that he would stand on principle and not get himself hurt, okay? Compromise is not always a good thing. There's not enough people standing on the principles that benefit this country. There's not enough people standing on principles that benefit the individual. There's too many people making compromises that ultimately affect your life in a negative way. There's too many people compromising to hand the government more power to take from you.
But we're really talking about our colleagues, and our colleagues are not bad people. They just have different feelings. We're not talking about compromising with evil. We're talking about compromising with our friends so that we
Okay.
can get something done.
Okay. So we're going to flip the order around because I think that's what we need. And so we're going to start with Carlos Conway with the next question. And so education, roads, public safety, public parks. What strategies would you use to prioritize making budgetary decisions?
What strategies would I use to make budgetary decisions? As far as education, infrastructure, I think you know, the free markets are the best solution for education, and here's why. It's because that it's because everybody's different, and everybody learns differently, and free markets pick up on that. I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to answer all those questions. It was
Could you repeat the question?
yeah.
Yes. So education, roads, public safety, public parks. So there's lots of things that the state pays for.
Right.
What would you do to prioritize these in making budget decisions for the state budget?
Okay.
I'll
Well,
expand it so it's a little more
yeah, there was a lot in there.
transparent.
I mean, education is a very important thing, and in the Minnesota Constitution, we have an obligation to fund education. It is important. It should be the first priority of all of us, I believe, because we have an achievement gap here in Minnesota, and it needs to be bridged. The low-income families in this city really need an opportunity to succeed. And so we need to focus on education and what we can do to help them succeed. And I believe that a voucher type system would work best to give these low-income families the best opportunity to choose what kind of education is best for their family, as opposed to being limited to one choice. I'm not saying public schools are a bad choice. It's just they don't always work for everybody. And other solutions do. Charter schools are doing good. Homeschoolers do a good job. Private schools do a good job too. And I would like to open up these choices and opportunities to everybody.
Thank you. Rena Moran.
I have 3 priorities, in which I have plenty of passion around, and I think that really impacts the district that I represent. We need to have a strong educational system because we need an educated workforce. We are paying through our necks for health care on the back end. We need to do some better work at the front end with health care, so it needs to be affordable and it needs to be sustainable. And we need to work so hard to create jobs in our community, which also creates safe streets. It keeps our parks and recs open. We need to make sure our libraries are open. We need to, in my mind, focus on those 3 things. And there's much more that we can and should do, but those would be my strategies for a budgetary year.
Daniel Lev.
Well, there's a lot of things that are very important for the state of Minnesota, education being, primary. But I believe education, as far as budgeting is concerned, gets the government out of it as much as possible, or education by any means necessary. We homeschool. We have 4 children. Yet I'm taxed, and then if my kid were to go into a public school, what is it, almost $18,000 that follows my child? Just give me the $18,000. I got 4 kids, at 80 grand. I'll hire 3 live-in educators for my children, and I promise they'll get a one-on-one education that'll far surpass anything the St. Paul school's done. In fact, we don't have any educators living at home except for my wife and I, which both have our degrees, but our children are already above the levels of the St. Paul students. Where's my money? Where's my tax money? You're going to increase my taxes? Do I get any of it? No. And why is that? Because the teachers' unions want all the money for themselves, for the schools, and they don't necessarily care. They don't want to benefit other people. Wasn't there legislation originally passed, I think, signed by these guys that was actually coming against charter schools and private schools, and in a way to restrict that? I want to open it up. Let there be trade. Let there be competition between the schools. In addition, you get down to health insurance. Why don't we allow people to shop across state lines for other insurance, for other vendors? We're limited in our choices, and therefore we're limited. Competition isn't allowed to work, so it looks expensive. And so that creates a problem, that creates a need where you have to go to the government. In this case, so you open up trade, there's lots of organizations that offer very inexpensive insurance if you're able to cross state lines. So there are ways that we can work to get the government as uninvolved as possible to open up your opportunities.
Carlos Mariani, budget priorities.
Well, tough. I mean, so many important things, right? Who's not going to argue that public safety is important, that public health is important? My priorities are clearly in investing in people, in education, strong public education system, where we support evidence-based, research-based approaches to powerfully preparing young minds to become productive citizens, entrepreneurs and workers, and not in some trickle-down theory of sort of hoping that if we just spread money around without being backed by research that we're going to produce that. So education is high on my list. I think caring for those who are hurting. I mean, that's my moral, religious, faith, personal, family upbringing. I was always taught to look out for my elderly, for others, and who are very needy, our disabled veterans. I can't do that by myself. I need all of us to work together to do that. A strong public health system is vitally important. And then infrastructure investments. Strong roads, strong ports, powerful technology, for online capacity to spread across the state is only going to be a good investment that's going to grow entrepreneurial activities and grow businesses in our state. But I would say my top priority, and I'm with my tocayo over there, my top priority is written into the state constitution. That is to deliver a powerful education system to our kids, and to do that through a public education system.
Thank you. Rick Karshnia.
Education, infrastructure, public safety, and public parks, these are all very important things. What government spends its money on, quite honestly, all of us, or excuse me, some of us could consider all of it very necessary, and we'd want to spend more on it. I look at the budget in a more sensible fashion. First of all, let's look at zero-based budgeting. Right now, budgets through the government see an annual increase automatically built in. All departments, government in general has an automatic increase, right around 5% every year. Let's just return to a zero-based budgeting effect. That department, whether it's education or public safety or whatever it is, doesn't get any more money unless they show that they need it for whatever reasons. And then at least the politicians could have the honest discussion about where that money is going to go. They could have an honest floor debate on it as well. Also, we can save a lot of funds just through attrition alone. People retiring, we don't have to continue rehiring for those positions if there's not a need in our state government to do so. I also agree with my counterparts as far as freedom in education. You can save a lot more money and get better results for your children by making the decision what school they go to, whether it's public, private, religious, whatever that case might be. Freedom is the best answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Sandy Pappas.
This is very difficult. It's like Sophie's choice because all these things are very important to have a strong community. And the way the budget works is they are each allocated a portion of the budget and nobody is really neglected. But if you really want to say how are we going to prioritize, then I would say that first of all we need to protect the vulnerable. And that is our obligation as a humane society to make sure that we protect the elderly, the children, the disabled, those who can't care for themselves, those who can't afford health care. I think that should be our #1 priority. Second, I would agree with my colleagues. It's in the Minnesota Constitution that the state should provide a fair and equal education for all the children, and that we do have choice within our system, that people can choose to go to a public charter school if they think that's a better choice for their child. They can do open enrollment. And we do have choices in terms of post-secondary options, that students can take college courses while they're still in high school, which would save them tremendous amount of money on the cost of college. And public safety, you just can't deny that if we don't feel like we're in a safe community, but part of that would also say that a clean and safe environment is also part of public safety. And that's where we're talking about our parks and our recreational centers and our libraries and our community resources that are so important to making us, to having a livable community.
Thank you. So I'm just going to squeeze in one more question. I'm not going to do rebuttals because I was told that we had no more questions, but I like to end on a positive note because I'm a kind of an optimistic person. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call on you in alphabetical order. We'll see if I can do that. It's good to challenge my brain also. And so I'd like to hear what your vision is for Minnesota. What would you like the state to look like in 5 or 10 years? And so we'll start with Carlos Conway.
Alphabetical. My vision for Minnesota is that it would be more free, you'd have more economic freedom, that you would have more choices to make as far as education and healthcare and jobs. So I would like to see a booming economy where we all can exceed, and I believe that the free market is the best way to do that. It advances the general welfare of everybody. It does not discriminate, and it's based on equal opportunity. So yeah, I would love to see a more prosperous Minnesota, more an economic boom. I look at North Dakota, and they have a big boom there. Obviously, everybody here knows about it. They have a worker shortage. So what businesses do when they have a worker shortage is they raise their wages so to attract more workers. And so you can make $20 an hour working at McDonald's in North Dakota. I would like to see wages go up that way, to see an economic boom here. And who doesn't want that? I mean, who doesn't want a job? Everyone wants a job. And I believe that the free market and private enterprises provide jobs, the permanent, sustainable jobs for all.
Thank you. By my calculations, the next up is Rick Karshnia. Your vision for Minnesota.
My vision for Minnesota would be more freedom for families instead of the one-size-fits-all government lesson that we seem to be taking from the federal government. I think it's a failed philosophy. I just want to give families more freedom to make decisions themselves for education. I think that's a fair thing for a family to decide on where to send their child for school. Also for health care. Let's reject the Affordable Care Act here in Minnesota. It's not good for Minnesotans, I don't believe. And I think Minnesotans would do best to stand up against it and help people who need health insurance by subsidizing it. There are people that are going to need help with insurance. And we can offer that by subsidizing their choice of health insurance. Also, a tax system that is fair for all Minnesotans. And what I mean by fair is, very importantly, transparent. Like I said before, the current system really hurts middle-class families. We need a simple, flat tax system. Why do we have to, every April, stress out about our taxes and take time away from our families and get depressed and order pizza and whatever else and do our taxes late at night? Or why do we have to spend $150 for an accountant to do our taxes? It's regressive towards the Minnesota family, to a Minnesota family. That money could be better served other places. So those three things: healthcare reform, education reform, and tax reform. That's what I want to work on to make it more free for families in Minnesota.
Thank you. So next up, Daniel Lipp. What's your vision for Minnesota?
We'd like to move the sun over here and turn the heat up a notch during 6 months out of the year. From the desert, a little warmer over there. I would like, what my colleagues have mentioned here about a freer society. I want Minnesotans to be free to educate their children how they want, free from the influences of federal belief system that may not be what we teach in our household, freedom from the public school system, which we may not teach in our household. I want equal opportunity for my family to teach our kids the way we'd like to. I think that we can all fight for each other's freedom. We could, like I said, we could spend the next 20 years in the House or in the Senate fighting for each other's freedom, because so much of it has been removed. Our Fourth Amendment has been extremely violated. Wiretaps, all the laws that are coming down with computers, SOPA, HIPAA, being able to monitor your internet. We know the government has been following Facebook for quite some time, et cetera, but as it is, I would like you to have your freedoms. And Democrats, I know social liberties is your thing. If you guys get back in, can you fight for a little bit of my freedom? Please? It used to be a big deal for you. Now that Obama signed NDA, it's like, oh, well, we'll shovel that under the carpet. If you get back in, for goodness sakes, try to work for our freedom. Bring business here. You have to compete for industry, all right? You have to compete for industry. Other companies do not have to come here and open up a factory, okay? Make it an environment they'd want to bring people here, okay? Make it affordable for them. Help them out, whatever you got to do. Jackson v. Mers, very bad decision for the Minnesota homeowners. The banks have a completely unfair advantage. They don't have to show any paperwork when they're foreclosing on you. I'm fighting a lawsuit myself with Wells Fargo says they own my house. I have proof that Lehman Brothers owns my house. But I'm not allowed to demand that Wells Fargo show me the documents, okay? That was done by the Minnesota Supreme Court. We should pass something similar to Bain versus Mers in Washington State, but we got to protect the Minnesotans from the corrupt influences of our day.
Thank you. So, Carlos Mariani, your vision for the state of Minnesota.
Well, I was just looking at it, I was smiling as you posed the question. Several elements. One, I'd like to see a powerful people in our state. I actually think we have a powerful people in our state. I want to see sort of the Minnesota brand of Americans. And I think the Minnesota brand of Americans are a people that are well educated, are well skilled, are well affirmed, are well supported, supporting one another, so much so that they attract, just the best that there is in the world, whether it's investments, whether it's, other people who share similar, ideas and energy, so that we can grow the next economy into the 21st century in a sustainable way, in a green way, in a way that really, truly liberates us from, the so much of the incredible negative power that we see with huge, unaccountable multinational corporations and Wall Street, speculators dictating whether or not I'm going to have a job or not. That starts with a powerful people who have the skills and the education to be able to shape the world around them. They would live in a clean place, sparkling waters and wonderful land that can grow good, strong, healthy food that we can pass on to our children. They would have the best infrastructure, I spoke about that earlier, so that we attract and continue to attract in the middle of this continent the best of the global economy. And yeah, I guess the future probably also involves the Vikings winning the Super Bowl at some point. So.
Thank you. Rena Moran, your vision for Minnesota.
I think my overall vision for the Minnesota that I want to see is a Minnesota where every child, family, and community is safe and self-sufficient. And what does that mean? So part of that is investment in education and starting at birth, that we invest early and get a good return to what our future looks like for a strong workforce. That we work towards closing the achievement gap with every student, regardless of color, are being successful in school. That we are bringing jobs to our state. And in the midst of bringing those jobs to our state, that we are eliminating the disparities between communities of color and the Caucasian community. I think that is really, really important, that we realize that we're all interconnected. And when others are without and lack, it impacts the whole. And so I think if we can thrive to have a strong healthcare system where that is affordable, that is sustainable, and that is not always tied to a job. I think every child, every person deserves to be able to have a system that supports their needs and that we are not using the emergency room when we get sick. The cost is just too huge. So I look forward to that vision. I look forward to a state that represents all of us.
Thank you. And we're finally at the end of the alphabet. Sandy Pappas, your vision for Minnesota.
Good, I started, so I'm delighted to finish. My vision is that we actually do eliminate the achievement gap and that all our students are move on to higher education so that then they can be successful and have good jobs. And we eliminate poverty in our state. Carlos and I served on a commission to eliminate poverty, and it's important to do that. That we have clean waters, clean lakes, clean rivers, and clean energy in our state. And finally, I think that we need to return to Minnesota nice, to a culture of courtesy, a culture of caring, and a culture of community. Thank you.
Thank you. I like ending on positive visions for the future. So there are lots of questions here. I could have gone all night. I think they could tell. So I was cut off. So I guess we're ready for our closing statements. And so we started from my right. So this time we'll start from my left. And so you have 2 minutes for your closing statements. And for anybody who had questions that didn't get asked, I apologize because I had a couple myself. So please make sure you catch the candidates before they go home or email them. And so Carlos Conway, who is running for the House seat 65B.
Well, in regards to education, healthcare, and jobs, those are probably the most important issues right now here and anywhere. I mean, not just Minnesota, but you have an option between a lot of people here to either choose people who believe they know what's best for you. Who want to limit your options to their options, to their opinion. Or you can choose someone who thinks that you know what's best for you. That the free markets provide a lot of options for everybody. That's what they do. It's what's best. It's in their best interest to provide options so you can choose what's best for yourself. That's the choices you have, and I want you to have more choices. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Thank you. So our next closing statement will be Rita Moran, and she's running for House seat 65A.
So in 2010, I decided to run for state representative to bring the voices of District 65A to the Capitol. And I am running for that same purpose, to be the voice for all of us. But not just to be the voice, but to bring you and what you represent, what you value to the Capitol. I think in a district that is diverse, at District 65A, needs to have a bigger presence, needs to have that voice, and to have a partnership with the Capitol, because the decisions that are made there impacts our lives dearly. And so I stand before you committed to doing that with you, for you, and in partnership. And my hope is that on November 6th, that you will come to the polls and vote no for the constitutional amendments, because it is about freedom and liberty and getting government out of our lives, and that you return your ballot over and say yes to our kids, because we need a strong educational system that supports our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next closing statement is Daniel Lipp, who is running for House Seat 65A.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I had a lot of fun, actually. I believe in you. I trust you. I believe you can make your own decisions. You don't need the government to tell you what to do or how to live your life. My job in the House would be to make sure that you have the decisions that you can make for yourself. I don't want to limit you in any way, how to live your life, how to run your life. Obviously, things are in place to prevent you from hurting other people. That's where we draw the line. But I want you to be able to live the life the way you want to. I want you to be able to educate your children the way you want to, in the best way that you see fit. I want that to be available for you. And all I have to do is work for your freedom. Government can do two things, basically. Take away your freedom or take away your property. I'll be voting no anytime those are options. Do we take away your freedom, limit your ability to live your life the way you want? Take away your property, money that you've earned. I mean, your income was always considered private property. It wasn't something that should be taken from you. The big problem with Minnesota is all these social issues. Benjamin Franklin said that basically freedom is just an experiment. Most likely you'll vote yourself into a tyranny. Okay, now how does that work? It's because I have my little social issue and I want the federal government and all their guns to enforce my views on you. And you have your little issue and you want the federal government and all their force to enforce your views on me, and we continually hand over more and more power to the authorities that are above us. Okay? And then what happens is some guy gets in charge in the end who doesn't like either one of us, and we've already handed away all of our powers, and whatever happens to us is our fault at that point. We could work long and hard to try to restore people's decisions back to themselves, back to their own families. That's the freedom that we want for you. We want to make that available, opening up competition in schools, with charter schools, voucher systems, homeschooling, leaving all those as options. And then a fair playing field also when it comes to the banks and corporate interests that fight against citizens of St. Paul. We want to make it a fair playing field. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Carlos Mariani, your closing statement. Again, he's running for the House Seat 65B.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the League, and thank you for watching and for being here today. The fact that you're doing this is a testament to the power that we have as a people, as a free people. Because when you're not free, you're not sitting in this room having this conversation. You're being told what to do in a cell far away from everyone else. My pledge to you, if I'm reelected, is to continue thoughtfully to work a government that is your tool, to work with you to shape the tool that is our government, because that's what it is. I will be thoughtful, I will be open-minded, I will be inclusive, I will continue to focus on social justice, care for those who are most in need, work for racial equality, something I'm very passionate about. I will give you my experience, I will give you my courage. I'm not afraid to have the fight that needs to be had, and I'm not afraid to work with others who think differently than I do. This is my commitment because you are my people, because it's about our kids, it's about my kids, it's about the place that I love dearly. And along with Rena, I would encourage you to vote no to the 2 constitutional amendments. They are about taking freedoms away from us. They are about enshrining differentness, discrimination, carving people apart and away from the pure, the wonderful enfranchisement of community. And so if you're powerful people, if you're a freedom-loving people, say no to those amendments, say yes to the levy referendum for our kids. The best thing we can do is to continue to support our kids.
Thank you. So now the closing statement from Rick Karshnia. Again, he's running for Senate seat 65.
Thank you for joining us tonight. It's really good seeing a lot of concerned citizens here, and I'm sure you're going to continue to be concerned citizens. And I want to thank the League of Women's Voters for putting on these debates. It is very important. And just a little fun fact on the League of Women Voters. If we can put Team Donkey and Team Elephant aside for a minute, and I'll tell you why I'm saying that in a little bit here. But in the 1980s, there was a third-party presidential candidate, and he scared the establishment stiff. His name was Ross Perot, and he got about almost 20% of the popular vote in this country. And at that time, the National League of Women's Voters used to moderate the presidential debates. Well, so happens it scared the establishment of those two parties, those two national parties, so much that they basically kicked the League of Women's Voters out and constructed their own committee, a committee on presidential debates, which is basically governed by the DNC and the RNC. So I hope at some point in time we can get the League of Women's Voters back as an impartial moderator for presidential debates. I am saying this because they're Team Elephant and Team Donkey. I'm saying that there's a great debate going on right now inside the Republican Party, and we're three of those candidates right now talking about freedom very consistently, I think, talking about following the Constitution very consistently. And I know our founding fathers had it right because they looked back 5,000 years through history. They didn't just look a couple of years ago, 5,000 years, and they saw one thing, one form of government, and it was tyranny. This place, America, was the only different form of government ever established by its people. And I think if we lose it here, we're going to be in big trouble. I'm running as a state senator to defend Minnesota families' freedoms to choose their health care, their education, and work on tax reform. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Sandy Pappas, also running for Senate seat 65. Your closing statement, please.
Thank you, and thank you once again to the League for sponsoring this, and thank you to all the viewers at home watching. And I especially want to thank the residents and citizens of District 65 for electing me for the last 2 decades. I really appreciate your support, and I hope I can have it again in this next election. What we're seeing here tonight is very interesting. It's 2 strong political strains in American culture. One is the libertarian strain, the individualistic approach, where everyone is out for him or herself independently from the rest of the community. The communitarian approach is the other one that says we're really all on this planet together. And according, as Paul Wellstone said, we all do better when we all do better. It doesn't mean that we give up our basic freedoms, of course not. We have the Bill of Rights, we have the Constitution. America was established to protect those very individualistic freedoms. But the reality is that freedom and community can coexist, and they need to coexist. In order to have a functioning community, we have to have government, we have to pay taxes, we have to have laws, we have to educate our children, we have to make sure that our people are healthy, and we all are pursuing happiness. So I'm really grateful that we had this debate tonight. I think it was very healthy. I think we need to have more debates like this that are, once again, are civil, where we're courteous to each other. There's been no yellings. I know I did get excited at one point. But mostly we've been very courteous and caring, and that's what we need for our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind you all that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters, and sponsorship of this forum is not endorsement by the League of any candidate. And the forum will be repeated on your cable TV station, and I would just check that channel for additional replay times. I would like to again thank the candidates and the live and television audience. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to acknowledge and thank these candidates who are serving the community by their willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. I would also like to thank them for their participation in the candidate forum, so thank you. Information about these candidates and others running in the general election is available on the League of Women Voters website at lwvmn.org, and this includes all of the candidates running for office. So if you're interested in judges and all those things that are a little more difficult to figure out, that's a good place and resource for you. In closing, I'd like to remind each of you that Tuesday, November 6th is Election Day, as if we could forget, but polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So on November 6th, take a friend and a neighbor and vote. So thank you and good night.